In this video, I'm going to talk about some of the free resources available to learn MSC Nastran. Now, there are some standard approaches that I want to first discuss. Then there is a advanced approach. I didn't realize that this was very effective until recently, so I wanted to talk about that effective towards the second half of this video. Now, I know there are a lot of resources available. Some of these resources are paid. They're not free. An example would be the training courses for Nastran. But here, I'm assuming you're not there yet. You don't want to spend on training yet. So I'm just going to talk about some of the free resources available. The first free resource available, depending on how you define free, are the Nastran manuals. So assuming that you've installed the Nastran documentation. So here there's one directory for the Nastran installation and a second directory for the Nastran documentation. So here you get a lot of PDF files here. These are going to be the various manuals for Nastran. Here I look for this document called Nastran library.pdf. And that's this document. This is going to be your gateway to all the different manuals that are available for Nastran. So here, I'll give you one example. I wanted to learn how to use the design sensitivity and optimization capability. So basically, I wanted to learn how to use Nastran's optimizer. So I actually printed a physical copy of this user's manual. I read through this manual numerous times. The first 5 times or the first 5 times you read the manual, it might make some sense, it might not make some sense. It takes multiple reads for this to finally make sense. So I encourage you to read the manuals. I printed this document. I went through with highlighters, pens, pencils. I annotated this document a lot. Now, just in case you want to print this, know of one thing. Companies want to save as much money as possible. The printers are going to be configured to use the least amount of toner. So one mistake that I did was I didn't change the setting for the font. So when I printed all 800 pages, I could hardly read the text. I had to use a lot of lights just to read the text. So if you plan on printing out the document, make sure you use dark text. So there are options in the printer. You would go ahead and change the configuration so it prints out darker font. Okay, so read the manual, read the Nastran manuals rather, and then textbooks. There are some really good FEA textbooks out there. So if you want to reach out for that, that's actually paid. So let me do this, paid resources. So let me do this. Training courses like Nastran 120. So I recommend searching for Hexagon Nastran training courses and 2 FEA textbooks. So again, this is not a discussion on paid options. This is a discussion on free options. So let's talk about the second free option, examples. Each manual is going to come with examples for the most part. I know there's some manuals that don't come with examples, so take what I said with a grain of salt. If you open up, say, the Dynamic Analysis User's Guide, let's go and look for examples here. Almost each chapter comes with a section devoted to examples. So here, as an example, say I wanted to learn this example here. You can see that there is a reference here to this input file .dat. So say you want to look at the text file, the input file for this example, that's available here. Or you can go to the Nastran documentation directory. You can search for inside of the TPL directories. Now, what's a TPL directory? TPL stands for Test Problem Library. There are literally thousands of Nastran examples in this directory. But here, we look for this example. We open it here. Maybe we use Notepad. And you might be asking, okay, what do all these different keywords mean? This is where we use a different manual called a quick reference guide. This is your Nastran Bible for each of these keywords. So say as an example, you want to learn how to use the frequency entry, which would be this entry here, frequency 1. You could come here, you could search for that entry, and you can start reading what all the different values mean. So here, what I do often is I have one window, one side devoted to the input file, and then the other side is devoted to the manual. So here I look at all the definitions. I see here that there are up to 5 values that you can supply. Here on the left, this is value 1, which is the name of the entry, value 2, which is the identification number, value 2, which is the first frequency in the set. The next value is the frequency increment, and then the number of increments. So here, what's going on is we start with 2, we go up 1 increment, then a second increment, then a third increment, and so on and so on. And we repeat that 160 times. Repeat 160 times in increments of 0.05 hertz. So that's what that entry is doing. Now, we have a new approach. I'll briefly show you how to use that approach. Here, we're using the SOL 200 web app. We are going to take that same bulk data file. We are going to take that bulk data file and import it to this tool here. Now, I'm interested in the so-called pre-web app here. We'll go ahead and look for the frequency 1 entry. We'll display the descriptions here. It's the same descriptions that you will find on the quick reference guide. So here, this value is the first frequency in the set, 2 hertz. The frequency increment, 0.05 hertz, and the number of increments, 160 increments. Here, we can open the BDF output. So as an example, say I want to change this to 200 hertz. You notice here that, or here, let me change that to 999 for now, 9999. You see that the 5th value has changed in that entry. Let me change it back to 200 increments. Now let me go ahead and make one adjustment here. I have to turn this off for this to run. Here, I've adjusted this example. So I'm now using 200 increments. I could go to download and then run this real quick. And then it will go ahead and run. And then I could just iterate off of that. So I've used 200 for now. Let me go back there. So I've used 200. Maybe I want to experiment with 300 as an example. So I go to download. I run again. I want to make sure that this runs. And then here we'll get some feedback regarding the F06 file. So here's the F06 file. And then what I can do is I can actually download a copy here. So let's go ahead and import that in this text file here. So here I've downloaded that BDF, but let's look at the frequency 1 entry. You notice that now the 5th value is 300. Before, in the original text file, it was 160, but we changed it to 300 in the web app. So that would be here, changed it to 300. We ran it with Nastran, and then we downloaded the input file, and now it's 300. So let me quickly summarize what I did there. The traditional approach is that you have the input file here on the left, and then you have the quick reference guide on the right. The newer approach that we have available is the following. You import it to the web app, you display the descriptions, and then you experiment with the bulk data entry. So here you make the change on the left, the entry is updated on the right, and then I go to run. And then I look at the new F06 file that you see here on the screen. So I'll leave it up to you to decide what way you like best, input file on the left and quick reference guide on the right, or we go and use the pre-web app to experiment here. Okay, so each manual is going to have its own list of examples. Here for the dynamic analysis user's guide, we found that there are examples here. Let's talk about this other approach that is uncommon, or it's not as known, but it's something I use almost on a daily basis. This is the GREP approach. So what is GREP? GREP is a way of searching multiple directories. So let's go ahead and do this. Let me navigate to the Nastran installation directory. And let me do this. Frequency 1, which was the bulk data entry we were experimenting with a moment ago. Say you want to find more examples of how that entry is used. This is what I would do. I would come here. I would prepare this grep command. Now, I'm using Linux. Some of you, or all of you, most likely are using Windows. So Windows grep program. There are Windows equivalents to this tool. So here, search for Windows grep program. And then you have various tools that you can download and use on your own system so you can follow along on your side. What I do is I prepare this. I say run grep, run this recursively for the directory. So search in that directory, then every child directory in there. I ignore the case. We don't care if it's lowercase or uppercase. Look for the string. pcomp_ls here, we'll change that to frequency 1. We'll look in the TPL directory and then every child directory. So we use the asterisk and search for only file types that end with .dat. So we don't want text files, txt. We don't want to search in PDF files. We only want to look in .dat files. So let's go ahead and copy this search string here. And now let's do Control C to stop the search. We get all these different examples. So I could take these examples and I can open them in a text file, and I can open the quick reference guide on the right, and I can look at what each of these examples is doing, or I can import it to the web app here and experiment here. Now, I'll give you another example, the pcomp_ls entry. This was an entry I was new to just recently, and I used the grep approach. So here what I'll do is this. There is one modification maybe I want to do. I'll change this to pcomp_ls. So search for any input file that has pcomp_ls. And here there are a lot of examples. There's also one example in the manuals. I won't show you that example, but say I want to experiment with that example. Again, you could go ahead and do this. You could open that example in a text file, and then you would have the quick reference guide on the right. So let's go ahead and find pcomp_ls. And so here on the left is that input file and the pcomp_ls, and you might be looking at this and trying to figure out, okay, what does each field do here? So alternatively, what I can do is I can import that same input file. So let's go ahead and find that bulk data file. That would be this example here. And then I can go ahead and find the pcomp_ls entry, display the descriptions, and here I get told what everything does. And then I can probe it a little bit more with the pre-web app. So here, let's maybe move this to the side. Let's turn something off here. And let's see if this works. Say I want to experiment with the direction field. Let's go ahead and change that to 3. So here are the various layers. Let me make one adjustment here. Let me change the angle for the first layer, just so we know which layer is 1. Okay, so the red layer, that's layer 1. Then the next layers are layer 2. Layer 2, 3, 4, and 5. So if I change the last layer to 45 as an example, it's blue. So layer 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Let's go ahead and keep changing the direction here. So let's try direction 2. Let's see what that does, or direction 1. And then it changes. And here I say, okay, perfect. This is actually what I want here. And then I can do other things. I can change the angles for this. So let's do that real quick. Negative 45 and 0 maybe, and then we'll change that last one to, we'll leave it as positive 45. So here, you could either do it like this. I lost myself, so let's go back to pcomp_ls. You would have the input file on the left, and then you have the quick reference guide on the right, and then you would try to map every value to the quick reference guide to get more information. Or you can use the web app to do the same thing. And you notice one thing here. Every time we modify any of these values, so suppose we want to use 999 for one of the angles, you'll see that the bulk data entry is immediately updated. So here we now have an angle of 99999 here on the right. So that was the last approach I have. Now, again, I wanted to talk about the free resources available. So we talked about reading the Nastran manuals, looking for examples. There are also some paid options like Nastran training courses and some FEA textbooks. And then I wanted to leave you off with this advanced approach, the GREP method. So it's very common that I'm looking through the documentation and I find a new entry that I'm unfamiliar with. Here as an example, the rload1 entry. I ask myself, okay, how do I use the rload1 entry? That's okay. We can go ahead and use GREP. We use GREP. We find an example. We then put the example here in the input file. We then have the quick reference guide on the right. So I look for rload1. And then I start reading what each of these fields means. Or alternatively, I can import that file here and start learning what each value does. So there are different ways of learning Nastran. This GREP way, I think, might be one of the more secretive ways because, frankly, nobody taught me the GREP way. I was learning how to use a different physics tool. There, I was using GREP, and I asked myself, why did I get really good at this other physics solver? What did I do differently? Here, what I did differently was I looked for examples. I dug around for all these different examples. I looked at example 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And then why was I even better? I used GREP. I used GREP to find targeted examples. And then I used the quick reference guide and the input file and the web app to learn, okay, what are all these modifications doing to my input file? So yeah, that's how you learn how to use MSC Nastran. I started off knowing nothing about Nastran. All of these keywords that you see here, I knew nothing about all these values. But it's through this series of steps that I showed you in this tutorial. This is ultimately what helped me a lot in learning how to use Nastran. So hopefully you found this video useful. I think we're pretty much at the end of the video. I always like to leave it off with a big thank you. Thank you so much for watching. And I look forward to having you see our upcoming videos.